So I'm going to start, Mark, with a question for you. In April of 2019, you spoke to us here in Ann Arbor, and you answered the question, what would it take for the Democrats to win in 2020? And you said that it wasn't going to be an election of persuading voters, but rather of getting them out to vote. So even though I'm not a psephologist, I imagine that you would concur that that's still the case. Do you?
Every election is about winning and getting to 50%. And every election has multiple possible alternatives. I sound like I'm just blathering here, but it's never a purely one thing or another. But right now, there are so few people who are undecided or fence sitting or neutral. I mean, no, they don't quite know if they like Donald Trump or don't like Donald Trump. A person who falls in that category has some sort of organic brain damage, right? You can't actually just think of Donald Trump as another politician that has good things and bad things, and from day to day, you might vote for him, you might vote for Joe Biden. There just isn't such an American. I mean, you can try to find them, but they aren't out there. But if there were one, I guess you should go try to pick up their vote. Far more people fall in the category. I'm sorry. Far more people fall in the category of completely. Far more people fall in the category. And so, what you have to deal with is an environment where everyone is berserk. In this environment, the easiest place to find additional voters for your side is not to persuade some of the soft members of the other side. I mean, that may happen anyway. They may be persuaded by how insane Donald Trump is becoming. And so a few of them may skitter out of his camp anyway. That won't be because we persuaded them. That'll be because they escaped. But far more valuable to us is to identify people who would vote for our side if they just manage to cast ballots. And that's really what I think this petition is about, is identifying people who can be persuaded to vote or can be manipulated to vote. It can be made possible for them to vote. And that will allow us to increase our tally. So I guess that amounts to saying, yes, this is not a persuasion election, it's a turnout election.
Mark, before I ask you to get to the heart of your presentation, I do want to acknowledge the presence of Representative Dingell, who's kind enough to join us today. Thank you. So Mark, you call what you're going to talk about today, what to do after the low-hanging fruit has been picked. Can you tell us why you think the low-hanging fruit hasn't picked or will be picked with or without us?
Yeah, you see, get out the vote theory is usually conducted, most theoretical discussions of get out the vote drives occur between old hack labor activists in bars late at night, reminiscing about the 1964 campaign. And that kind of mentality, I'm not particularly talking about old guys in bars, but that level of superficiality tells you why this is an effective tactic, why we phoned them. We put flyers under their doormats. We bought a sign and put it up on the corner. All of that is about a world that doesn't exist, but exists in myth. And that world is one where there are people out there who don't know it's election day. There are people out there who don't think it's important to vote. There are people out there who don't think that there's anything that will change if the current administration changes. And you need to go find those people and convince them that today is election day, that they are eligible to vote, that Donald Trump isn't their guy. I mean, that's kind of what Get Out the Vote is all aimed around. And so we can just text people something simple to remind them that it's election day. Well, this is total BS, right? There are no such votes available. If you actually go, as I have many elections, if you actually go look after the election for people who failed to vote, you don't really find people who would have voted if only somebody had told them that November 3rd is election day. Put flyers in their doors or mail them a postcard, it's just not going to work because those are not the actual cases where people are failing to vote. This year in Michigan, we're going to see 6 million or 5.5 million people vote, there are going to be about 2 million or 2.5 million adults who fail to vote in Michigan this year. And identifying them and identifying the specific reason for each of them, or set of reasons that causes them not to be part of the 5.5 million voters, that is a valuable use of time. But that's not where any get out the vote drive ever devotes its attention, because that requires multiple steps, record keeping, training, supervision of volunteers. It's all kinds of hard work. And it's so much better to just hand out 10,000 phone numbers to people and have them all text their friends to remind them it's election day. So when I talk about low-hanging fruit, I'm really talking about steps, tactics that would be effective in reminding people to vote if this were a school board election held on a Monday instead of a Tuesday, and so people don't actually know that today is election day. But if you contact me and say, oh no, today is election day, it's not tomorrow, it's today. You know, these tactics might work in that case. But that's not the situation here. In this case, we're going through a national nightmare. I mean, there are tens of millions of people who actually are having trouble sleeping because of their disgust and hatred for the current administration. So we're not looking here at people who don't know much or don't have strong opinions or are not connected with the political system and nudging them a little bit so they now know it's election day and decide that their vote's important. See, I've been doing get out the vote work since 1972. So what's that? This is now 48 years of it.
48 years.
And after each election, I look at the people who failed to vote and I wonder what it was that could have motivated them. And at first I really believed the things that everybody believed, that you knock on their doors and remind it's election day. And I just pretty quickly came to understand that I couldn't find those people, right? We always talk about how only 50 or 55% of the public votes and the rest of them, they don't care. Go out and try to find those other 45% who don't care. I mean, you'll find some people who have personal problems or who are just not interested at all in public events, public affairs. But mostly what you find is somebody who just moved here from Florida, who is still registered to vote in Florida, and who hasn't sold the house yet, but she moved back to be near her daughter, and her health isn't good. And you think, boy, that's complicated. What are we going to do? And the answer is, she's eligible to vote under current Michigan law. She's eligible to vote here. And so if she wants to vote, we just have to get her to go through the steps of applying for an absentee ballot, receiving it, voting it, and returning it. And we can facilitate each of those steps. But again, sending her a flyer is just not really it's not the solution to this problem. I can go through maybe 10 different scenarios, but they're all sort of the same. And they all say what we need to do involves more resources and more planning about specific individuals. One thing to think about is, let's take our volunteer time and pretend it's worth $20 an hour or $10 an hour. It doesn't really matter what the exact number is. If we take money and volunteer time, how much does it cost, or will it cost this November, to add a marginal vote? Not the votes we already have, not the first 6 million or 5.5 million voters in Michigan. But if 5.5 million people would vote anyway, how much does it cost to add 1,000 more people to the voter rolls who actually cast ballots in November, between volunteer time and money? And you might think, everybody would think, I would think, if I didn't spend so much time obsessing with it, that the answer might be $5 or $10 or $20. That an hour of your time or 100 flyers or something like that, that if you put in another $10 or $20 worth of effort, you could turn out an additional voter. Well, that's just not at all true. It's just wildly off. It seems intuitively likely, but it's just not right. And we know this because if we could turn out 1,000 additional voters, we certainly would be willing to spend $20,000 on it. Hell, for $1 million, we could add, let's say it's $10 a vote, we could add for $1 million, we could add 100,000 voters. Lordy, why in the world haven't we done? We would have won a whole bunch of elections, right? And the amount of money that will be spent in Michigan on get out the vote between the campaigns, the Democratic Party, various quasi-independent groups, that amount of money will probably be in these several hundred million, maybe $500 million range. At $10 a piece, that would mean we could add, 50 million voters here. So obviously the arithmetic is wrong. The actual number in a typical presidential election is about $1,000 a vote. In other words, about 100 hours of somebody's volunteer time to get one person more to the polls. Okay, this year will be worse because the level of enthusiasm is so high and because the resources are so excessively high, because everybody is berserk about this election. And so probably the marginal cost per additional vote is more like, you won't believe this, is more like $5,000 per vote. So if each of your volunteers can get one more person to the polls, they'd be doing well, not badly. And in the face of this, I'm sorry, the labor guys in the bar talking late at night, I've suffered that in my childhood. I met them and I listened to their stories and actually believed them. And they just tell me that you go and flyer all the 60% Dem precincts, which you just go down to InstaPrint and get, 1,000 flyers, and then you can do a whole precinct. That'll turn out a lot of votes. That's how they do it every year. And they are like a memory from my childhood of how utterly wrong adults can be. Okay? Flyering that precinct will not get you any votes. Okay? So let's talk about specific tactics that you might be able to implement. And these are illustrative. These are not, you shouldn't go and try to apply the exact situation I'm describing here. You should use this to inspire you to do something similar. So let's just take a few of these. I described before a scenario of a young woman whose boyfriend is on drugs and has the apartment and 10 other things. And obviously you can't solve any of her problems. You have to accept her problems, and you have to think your goal is to exploit her to get her to cast an actual vote, right? Well, if she can, once you find her on the voter rolls, and she's either one place or the other, she's eligible to apply for an absentee ballot, and you can get her the application. You can fill it out completely except for her signature, and then technically it's illegal for you to handle it after that. And I'm not urging anybody to exactly violate the law, but somehow if her signed application gets in the mail, it'll get to the clerk and she'll get a ballot. And then you can begin badgering her very nicely through her parents, through her, let's say her mother is interested in politics and you're working with her parents to make sure that she actually gets the ballot back. So you do all that and she gets her ballot back, and now she's off the list and you don't ever have to worry about her. You're done. That's one reason that vote by mail is so nice, because you can devote the time and attention and accept the necessary delays while people flounder. Many of the people who are difficult to turn out, many of those people who are the additional 500,000 or 1 million people in Michigan who might vote, are extremely bad about paperwork. They're just, it's not about voting. These people don't license their dogs. They don't pay their rent on time. They never, they sign up at the community college and they never actually show up for class, on and on. Okay, trust me, you're going to discover dysfunction, and not voting is just a particular aspect of personal dysfunction for many of them. So that's one category. Another category is the people who are brand new in town, perfectly competent voters, let's say, except that they're registered to vote in Florida, and they don't live in Florida anymore. They've lived here in Michigan since August 9th, when they moved here to, take a new job or to be near relatives or whatever. Well, that person doesn't know anything about Michigan, feels like they shouldn't get involved yet. They don't really know what they're doing. Well, the answer is it doesn't matter. You're qualified. pick them up and we carry them through the process, and we assure them that we will bombard them with all the information they need, and we ask them questions, and we engage them in politics enough to get them interested, and then we get them to actually get an absentee ballot and actually return it. The turnout rate for people in that category who have moved from another state in the last 60 days is very, very low. And so there are a very good opportunity to turn out an additional vote. Another category, maybe I'm moving too fast here, but another category is kids who are 18, 19, 20, and who are, well, of course, this year, who knows? I was going to say away at school. Maybe there are no such kids. I don't know. Is anybody going away to school this year? Let's just assume they are. I'll pretend for the purposes of the following explanation that we're not talking about this year and COVID-19. So let's take a normal year. Somebody goes away to college. He's 18, he's 19, he's 20. He has never voted. You're dealing with a person who was maybe not eligible to vote in the last gubernatorial election. Some of them voted in the presidential primary, but most of them did not. And so we're dealing with a person who has literally never cast a ballot. And it's all kind of vague and mysterious. They think it's a good idea. They go to rallies maybe, but they don't know anything about actually voting. If you talk to mom and you talk to the kid and you get him an application, or you explain to him what the timetable is, and if you have a person on the ground at Albion to actually work with him to make sure that he gets it and returns it, or you warn him that he's run out of time, and either he's got to drive back to West Bloomfield to vote, which he's not going to do probably, although this year maybe he is. God, all the calculations are off this year, because who knows, maybe why hang around Albion? Why not take the week off, right? They can't go to class anyway. God, I'm sorry, I'm an old fart. I'm not adjusting well enough to the change in events. Anyway, to go back to the stream that the fantasy I had of the kid who was in Albion on Tuesday, you have to convince him to go to Albion City Hall and cast a ballot, right? He can do all this, and you explain to him how it does, and you actually work with him to get him from point A to point B to point C onto the little bus to City Hall to vote, to apply, to register to vote, apply for a ballot, receive the ballot, vote the ballot, turn the ballot in all at the same time, and then bring him back to the dorm, okay? That's doable, right? The kid who was out of state, maybe you get his cell phone number from mom, you work with mom, you talk to him, you talk to them, you work it out, you get in the application, you get the application back. The application is probably electronic. You know, you send it to him electronically to save a few days. You make sure that the ballot has been received, that he knows it in his mailbox. Kids, by the way, in dorms no longer check their mailboxes because nothing arrives there anymore. It's another very sad thing about politics that I've learned. As a candidate for county commissioner, I can mail all these kids' campaign flyers, and they sit there forever because they no longer receive checks, letters, or bills, right? So what's the point of check, you know? Anyway, in your mailbox, there is a ballot, and you need to go down to the mailbox and find the key and get your mail, and that nice red, white, and blue envelope. That's the one. Yes. And then you need to find a stamp. That's right. Yes. Okay. So the kid who's away at college, the person who's moved here recently, the relative who is a couple points off, alcohol or drug problems or psychiatric problems or personal relationships problems, you think, I don't really want to deal with that. But that is the 500,000 or 1 million targets that are really out there. So I was thinking for a long time about these mythical people who needed to be reminded it was election day. I could never find any, right? And there have now been very good controlled experiments run by these two guys at Yale University I work with, Don Green and Alan Gerber. And they've been looking for those people who just need to be reminded, and they didn't find them, right? I mean, they tried these tactics, reminding people it was election day, has almost no impact. So what I realized was that, among other things, there's a large group of people in the United States, let's say 5 to 10% of the public,
that has figured out a long time ago that nobody knows if you vote. And so you can get all of the social status of being a voter and political if you just talk a good game. These people actually, within a week after the election, we know that they are already claiming they voted in the election when they cannot really have forgotten that they didn't. But they have discovered, just like counties where you can evade jury service by throwing away the jury notice because nobody ever checks on you, or places that you don't have to license your dog because there's actually no enforcement. They send you a dog license and you can pay the $30 or you can not bother returning it, right? Well, you can not bother voting and tell people about your political views. It turns out that that group of people is a pretty substantial number of people, and they have learned deceptive behaviors. So if you examine the people that claim they vote and you look at the voter records to remove the people who actually did vote, you're left with this residue of 5 or 10% of the public that will answer a question, did you vote in the election last week? Yes. And then you check and you can't find any record they did vote. A couple of the characteristics they have, one of the ones that jumps right out was about media behavior. They tend to watch something like 6 hours of television per day. In other words, these are not people who are unpolitical. They are people who their relation to politics is the same as their relation to athletics. They believe that they're active in athletics because they watch a lot of televised football. Okay? They believe that they are active in city affairs because they watch the city council on TV all the time and yell at the screen. And they think that they're active in politics because they watch CNN endlessly. Well, so now what can you do about this person? If you go and tell them how important it is to vote, they already know it's important to vote. If you remind them it's election day, they already know it's election day. If you tell them about the issues of the day, hell, they'll argue with you because they know more about the issues of the day than you do because they've been watching TV when you were out knocking on doors. You have to come up with a tactic that is aimed at them. And that's the theme of everything I've been saying here. The tactic has to be aimed and designed for the individual. So if you take that individual and you send a flyer to them with a list of everyone on their block and who voted and who didn't in the most recent election, and you send this same flyer to their neighbors, by golly, not only do you permanently change their behavior by scaring the bejesus out of them, you can get them to drive to Lansing and threaten me, which they did, only a couple of them. You can actually get somebody on the phone to Yale University to get a hold of the general counsel of Yale University and to threaten never to make donations and to cause trouble for, I'm not kidding, Yale University, and to get the chair of the political science department to go and talk to Alan Gerber and Don Green and have them call me and say, Mark, we've got to revise the description of how this research came about because we're getting a lot of heat here at Yale, okay? That is how angry you can make that guy, okay? And that happened too, okay? So everybody has always wanted to water down my tactics, which is fine, really. You shouldn't take it full strength. But it's a very powerful tactic if you're aimed at the specific person who has discovered that he doesn't have to vote because he can just hum as if he knows the song, okay? But that tactic won't work for the guy on the highway shoulder. It won't work for the woman whose boyfriend is on drugs and won't give her back her clothes, right? It won't work for the woman who just moved here from Florida. It won't work for the guy who is starting school at UCLA and thinks his mom is going to get him an absentee ballot. In each case, you need to learn about their circumstances and to figure out from your collection of tools which tools can be put together to pry them loose and to get them into the column of, with a little X by their name, for ballot returned, ballot cast. And generally, that is not to send them a flyer reminding them that's election day. There, I've run out of steam. You asked me a question.
It's time for a commercial, I guess, that if you want to know who these people are that Mark has been talking about, the ones who don't vote and who are likely Democrats. If you sign up for the WAVE system, you'll be able to identify them and you'll be able to contact them. And whether they're the people who have just moved to Michigan or whether they've been here a long time, we've got a lot of information about them. Many of you can see if they're your neighbors. We'll help you with that. So you can sign up to get more information from WAVE by going to the email address in the chat function. And we desperately want your help. And remember Mark's number. If you can get one more voter, $5,000 worth of effort. $5,000. So it might be the roommate of your son or grandson who's attending college here as a freshman. Mark has enumerated a number of categories, and I'm sure you can think of some of your own, and we'll help you think of some of your own. So don't use the excuse that I've been heard that, oh, the people I know, they all vote. They're good at hiding, but they don't all vote. And you can influence them subtly. It doesn't have to be totally in your face. You can say, I'm here to help. See, you have any, your vote. Oh, there might be a problem with your clerk because I look at the records and your clerk hasn't received your ballot back yet. Here's how you can call your clerk to see why they haven't gotten your ballot. There's all sorts of strategies that you can subtly let people you know that you know whether they're voting or not. So that's the end of the political, the ad at the moment. Any other?
I'd like to follow that one up, if I may. It is almost always true that if you find a good voter, you are on the trail to a weak voter, right? Because almost everybody, if you talk to them long enough, you discover that they have a son or a daughter or a mother or a father or an aunt who is in poor health or not political or has recently moved or has legal problems, has psychiatric problems. If they don't have those, they have a neighbor, they have a former roommate, they have somebody from college they've kept touch with who's on hard times. Everybody, when you talk to them, I mean, I know this for myself. I look around and I find in my own life, I have 5 or 10 people that I know are going to be difficult to turn out, and I'm not unusual. I mean, if you just,
Oh, you're unusual, Mark, but not in that sense. Yeah.
If you just pursue any individual and just get them to talk about their lives, you will quickly discover that they do know people who are leftist or liberal or progressive or anti-Trump in orientation who are not likely to vote. And once you've focused on that, now you're on the trail of that one voter. And you shouldn't write it off by saying, well, it's only one voter, because one voter is really, you're doing well at one. If you get 2, that's really great.
Another plug for the WAVE system, and I've used this and found it fascinating. If you look up a friend or somebody you know, it will tell you whom else lives in that household. And then if you check whom else is in that household, often it's children, you'll find out, yeah, the parents, they're 100% voters. They're out there all the time, but the kids aren't. So Mark's point is very well taken. And again, the WAVE system can help you in identifying those indirect relationships you might have. So thank you again for attending. Wear a mask, vote from home, vote early, and adopt some folks to get to do so too. So have a great weekend. Thank you all.